So DP sir, we'll just start in a couple of minutes. People are joining in.
It's not background TV.
DP sir, we'll start. We have more than 550 people already joined. I think people are still joining. Now we are at 575. So can we start, sir? DP sir, can you hear me? DP sir, your voice is, I'm not able to hear.
Yeah.
DP sir, can you hear me now? Still mute icon is there, sir. Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay. ये लैपटॉप लेके Okay. Can you hear me now? एक मिनट आपको पढ़ा दें।
Yes, sir. Sir, can you hear me? We are not able to hear you, sir.
अरे बोर्ड रूम का यहाँ पे क्यों ये बोर्ड रूम वाले में क्यों
से अनम्यूट कर रहा हूँ बट यहाँ से भी म्यूट हो रहा है।
स्टार्ट कर लो थोड़ा साउंड में प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है स्टार्ट
Okay, I think there is some issue. We are trying to connect DP sir as well as Dinesh. But I think in the meantime, let me start. There are around 775 people who have already joined us. Thank you very much. आप सब लोगों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. बहुत लोग चैट बॉक्स में लिख रहे हैं कि हिंदी में बात करें. तो जैसा कि आप जानते हैं ये एक ऑल इंडिया कॉल है एंड वी विल हैव टू यूज हिंदी एंड इंग्लिश बोथ. और इंडिया के अंदर तो लोगों को एक बहुत ही प्राउड फील करना चाहिए कि हम में ज्यादातर लोग समझ लेते हैं और हमारे बिजनेस के अंदर मल्टीलिंगुअल बायलिंगुअल चलता है. तो हम कोशिश करेंगे कि जितना हम हिंदी में भी बात कर पाएं, बट डेफिनेटली इट विल बी इन इंग्लिश एंड हिंदी. और सिंपल वे में बोलेंगे, सब अपनी मैसेज को आप तक पहुंचाने की पूरी कोशिश करेंगे. अगर आप आज इंडिया की स्थिति देखें तो मैं शुरुआत करता हूं. आई एम श्योर अभी कपल ऑफ मिनट्स में बाकी लोग हमारे साथ जुड़ पाएंगे और मैं आप लोगों का समय व्यर्थ नहीं करना चाहता. दैट्स व्हाई आई एम जस्ट स्टार्टिंग इट. सो अगर आप इंडिया को देखो, इंडिया कंटिन्यूज टू बी लाइक अ आइलैंड ऑफ होप in a global economy which is fighting inflation, high interest rates and slowing economy. तो अगर आप ग्लोबली देखें, अगर आप यूएस की बात करें, अगर आप यूरोप की बात करें, आप देखेंगे कि ये मार्केट्स जो हैं वो आज भी स्ट्रगल कर रही हैं. जहां तक इन्फ्लेशन की बात आती है, रेट्स इन इकोनॉमीज के अंदर इतने जल्दी इतने ज्यादा बढ़ गए हैं कि इसके कारण स्लो डाउन आ गया है, वहां पे इकोनॉमिक स्लो डाउन आ गया. तो ये चैलेंजेस हम देखते हैं अपने आसपास, बट इंडिया कंटिन्यूज टू बी ग्रो. अगर आप भारत में बाहर निकलें, अगर आपने कोई फ्लाइट रिसेंटली ली हो तो आप देखेंगे कि फ्लाइट्स आर कंप्लीटली फुल. इफ यू गो टू एनी होटल टैरिफ्स हैव गॉन थ्रू द रूफ एंड यू गो एनीवेयर, तो आपको एक ही चीज मिलती है कि इकोनॉमी के अंदर काफी एक्सूबरेंस नजर आती है. मगर ये एक्सूबरेंस भी किस तरह से हमें देखनी चाहिए, आज हमारे साथ जो एक्सपर्ट्स जुड़ेंगे वो हमारे को बताएंगे कि इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर अस आल्सो टू एक्चुअली ट्राई टू रीड what is happening in our economy, what is happening in our markets, what to expect from our markets. So आज हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव यही रहेगा कि हम आपको हमारी नजरों से how we are looking at market, we should be able to convey that to you. Now, इंडिया के अंदर भी अगर आप देखें, if you really look at the corporate earning growth in India, last 10 years, यानी 2010 से 2020 तक was a lost decade, जहां पे इंडिया में corporate earning growth कुछ हुआ नहीं था. हमने देखा 2020 के बाद corporate earning growth वापस आना शुरू हुआ. और अभी पिछले अगर आप देखें पिछले 1-2 महीने के अंदर फिर से थोड़ी सी डिसेलरेशन आई है, बिकॉज इंडिया आइसोलेशन के अंदर ग्रो नहीं कर सकता. वी कैन नॉट कंटिन्यू टू ग्रो इन आइसोलेशन. if the global economy is going to become weak, then definitely it is going to have its impact on Indian growth also. But one thing which is very positive is that Indian corporate earnings have started growing. They may they may not grow at a very rapid pace in next couple of quarters, but this change that we have seen with respect to last decades, that corporate earnings were not growing at all, hardly 2 to 3% growth was there. Now that growth has gone up to 12-13%, and what we believe is it is a long-term trend and it will continue, and that makes us positive on markets. But as of now, I think the concern that we face is that probably the valuations of Indian markets are a little stretched. तो आज के हमारे सेशन के अंदर हमारा यही ऑब्जेक्टिव रहेगा। हमारे साथ दिनेश बालाचंद्रन हैं। दिनेश, आर यू देयर? डीपी सर,
Yes,
आर यू
yes,
देयर?
yeah, yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, your voice is a little feeble, sir.
Is it better now? Is it
Sir,
better
at
now?
least I am not able to hear you properly. I know, we are able to hear you, but the voice is feeble.
Okay. Anyhow, when I'll try to speak loudly as possible. Thank you very much. या तो मैं एक काम करता हूँ, अब दिनेश इज देयर, पर दिनेश की भी आवाज नहीं आएगी ना। एक मिनट दो
Sir,
जरा,
please
एक
go
मिनट।
ahead, sir. Please go ahead. It's clearer now.
ओके, सो थैंक यू वेरी मच। आप सब लोग जो इस कॉल में जुड़े हैं हमारे साथ, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका। संदीप जैसे बता रहे थे कि आज एक खास तौर पे एटलीस्ट इस फाइनेंशियल में आज तक का जो दिन है वो हमारे लिए अच्छा ही रहा है। बिजनेस के हिसाब से भी अच्छा रहा है, और ओवरऑल जो इकोनॉमी में हमारा जो एक मनोबल है वो बना हुआ है। I mean, we are in the high spirits, and as an economy we see that the markets are giving good returns. Both in debt and equity markets we have got good returns. दोनों ने एक अच्छा जो पिछले एक साल में हमें बहुत ज्यादा नामोशी की स्थिति थी, जिसमें हमें ज्यादा रिटर्न नहीं आ रही थी, एंड वी वर स्ट्रगलिंग विद गेटिंग द अल्फा जनरेशन एज वेल एज द एब्सोल्यूट रिटर्न्स. So something is come back in the month of April. Until date, see, and we are so happy that our funds are doing very well. स्पेशली आप सब लोगों ने जितना हमें सहयोग दिया, उसके हिसाब से पिछले साल में एक सबसे बड़ी बात जो हुई, पूरी इंडस्ट्री में नेट सेल्स बहुत कम रही बिकॉज ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम इन द डेट फंड्स। और उस जब बहुत कम सेल्स हुई तो भी इंडस्ट्री में करीब 75,000 करोड़ की नेट सेल हुई। उसमें से हमारा धन्यवाद आपको इसलिए है क्योंकि उसमें से मोर देन 50% नेट सेल्स आप लोगों की मदद से हमारे पास आई। वी गॉट अराउंड 43,000 crores of net sales out of 75,000 crore net sales in the industry. This is an approximate number. So that's asked for, and thank you. You owe a thank you from our side, and we are really thankful that you have been giving us a lot of support. And we at our end always keep on trying that how to create value for your investors, along with when of course you and us are the secondary part. The primary is our investor should make some money when he is trusting us, when he is putting money through us and putting the money in the funds. उनके लिए सबसे बड़ी बात है कि उनका पैसा बनना चाहिए, और उनका जब गिरावट आती है मार्केट में, उनकी गिरावट को हमें रोक के रखना चाहिए। इन दोनों में हम कामयाब रहे हैं। हमें इस बात की संतुष्टि है कि जब हम मार्केट गिरी तो हम उसको रोक के, हम ज्यादा से ज्यादा उसके डाउनफॉल को रोक के रख पाए। एक या दो फंड में जिसमें आपका एक बड़ा कंसर्न था, क्योंकि फोकस्ड इक्विटी फंड वाज आवर फ्लैगशिप फंड, और आप लग रहा था कि उसमें हमारी रिटर्न अच्छी 1-1.5 साल से नहीं आ रही थी बिकॉज ऑफ द ऑब्वियस रीजंस ऑफ हैविंग सम इन्वेस्टमेंट इन फॉरेन स्टॉक्स। बट पिछले 1-1.5 महीने में 6% का एब्सोल्यूट रिटर्न उसमें आ गया। वी आर बैक विद द बैंक and the fund will continue to do well. You need not worry about it. And one thing I can assure you that SBI Funds Management Limited, in whatever offering they are coming out, will never let you down in front of the investor. जो भी होगा explainable होगा। अच्छा करेंगे तो भी explainable होगा हमने अच्छा कैसे किया। थोड़ा कम होगा, मार्केट गिरेगी, कि अगर मार्केट गिरेगी ऑफ कोर्स इसका इम्पैक्ट तो स्कीम्स पे भी आएगा, तो भी हम एक्सप्लेन कर पाएंगे कि हमने कम गिरावट को कैसे रोक के कम गिरावट दिया। सो वी आर देयर। अनदर थिंग व्हिच वी हैव सीन नाउ इज द ग्लोबल सक्सेस स्टोरी ऑफ एसआईपीज का जो 14,000 करोड़ रुपए का ट्रिगर अमाउंट है हिंदुस्तान की इकोनॉमी में, इट्स a very big amount. No other country on the globe could have this much kind of like $2 billion kind of structured flows coming into the active funds and in this manner. But this story continues, and we are sure, and we have taken a task that we will double the SIP book, and with your help. Of course, our doubling the SIP book means that you are doubling the SIP book. we whatever we are the aggregate of what you guys are doing. आप जो भी काम करोगे वही हमें उसका जोड़ करके ही हमें मिलने वाला है. तो हमारा ये एक वाहन आपके लिए आह्वान है, ये हमारी एक कॉल है कि आप थोड़ा बड़ा सोचो. डबल द एसएपी बुक साइड इन व्हाटएवर यू आर डूइंग, अगर आप एसएपी कर रहे हो. और दूसरा, जहां तक हाइब्रिड, वी always position ourselves as the house of hybrids so that we can provide solutions. Our call is always that a credible distributor should have at least 25% of its income coming from the solution funds on the month-to-month basis. That is something we would like to work hand in hand with you. किसी भी तरह की जरूरत हो तो हम आपके लिए तैयार हैं. बट इस निवेश की बात में आज जब दिनेश बालाचंद्रन है, बात आपको मालूम ही है, दिनेश बालाचंद्रन हमारा कॉन्ट्रा फंड, लॉन्ग टर्म इक्विटी फंड, ये दोनों बहुत अच्छे से देख रहे हैं. एंड आवर कॉन्ट्रा फंड has beaten not only all the mutual fund schemes, but majority of the AIFs and PMS in the country for not only 1 year, but 3 to 5 years also. That is the kind of performance which this fund has generated. And of course, I'm not talking about that. I will not tell him to give you the selling points of contra fund, but what is his views on the market? How should we navigate into this kind of situation where we are? And one thing is very clear, the people who are putting money with us through you are aware that they are putting money in equity markets, and equity markets are subject to market risk. But we at our end will try to continue with our efforts to create alpha over the longer period. So thank you very much once again for your continuous support. This is the first Nivesh Ki Baat in the current financial year, and I am sure this current financial year 2023-24 is going to be a totally different, and our funds will grow at least 4 to 5x of whatever the growth has come during the last year. अगर पिछले साल में 75,000 का नेट सेल्स हुआ है, तो इस साल मेरा जो अनुमान है, कम से कम इंडस्ट्री में 4 से 5 लाख करोड़ का निवेश आने वाला है, और हम सब लोगों को उसके लिए तैयार रहना है. मार्क टू मार्केट भी आएगा, उससे अपनी आमदन बढ़ेगी, और जो नेट फ्लोज हैं वो बढ़ने वाले हैं. बट इट हैज टू हैपन. बट ओनली थिंग इज we have to take care of the servicing of our clients with the utmost priority, which for us is the topmost priority. We'll try to give as much solutions as possible, but at your end also, you have to continue servicing your client, which you are already doing in the best of your efforts. But these were, thank you very much once again, and I hand it over to Dinesh Balachandran. Dinesh, over to you. You can come here. You'll be more visible.
So before Dinesh starts, I just wanted to share a couple of things so that we are able to hear Dinesh with that perspective. What we have seen, हमने इंडस्ट्री के अंदर क्या देखा है कि there have been certain changes which have happened on the debt taxation side. अब debt taxation के अंदर जो changes हुए हैं, what it has led to is, जैसा बोला जाता है ना कि everything that happens there is an opportunity, there is always an opportunity. हमारी इंडस्ट्री के अंदर यूजुअली क्या होता था कि हम लोग एसेट एलोकेशन अगर करते भी थे तो उसमें हम डेट फंड अलग चूज करते थे, इक्विटी फंड अलग चूज करते थे. अभी ये जो सडनली टैक्स चेंज हुआ है, हमें ऐसा लगता है, व्हाट वी स्ट्रांगली बिलीव इज दैट हाइब्रिड्स, सर ने भी बोला हाउस ऑफ हाइब्रिड्स, हम हमेशा से अपने आप को पोजीशन करते आ रहे हैं. हमें लगता है अब हाइब्रिड फंड्स जो हैं वो बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट ऑफ एनीवन्स पोर्टफोलियो बन जाएंगे. डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स हु यूज्ड टू लुक एट debt separately and equity separately, now with debt taxation going away, will start looking at hybrids more closely, and that is our understanding also, and that is what we want to share with you today, wherein we will Dinesh probably will talk to you on our multi-asset allocation fund, which we believe is a very apt product in the present time. And just before I hand it over to Dinesh, I also wanted to just take the point which DP sir mentioned. DP sir ने बोला कि हम लोगों ने SBI म्यूचुअल फंड में एक अपना एक संकल्प लिया है. We have taken a oath that in this year we are going to double our SIP book. और ये ओथ हमने क्यों लिया है, ये संकल्प हमने क्यों लिया है? बिकॉज हमें ऐसा लगता है मार्केट जिस स्थिति के अंदर है उन स्थिति के अंदर अगर कोई सिस्टमैटिकली पैसा लगाता जाएगा तो ये बहुत ही अच्छा समय है पैसा एक्यूमुलेट करने का इक्विटी के अंदर, और एसआईपी से बेटर ऑल्टरनेटिव कुछ हो नहीं सकता। अभी जब हम बात करते हैं कि हम एसआईपी बुक अपनी डबल कर देंगे, अभी सिर्फ बोलने से तो डबल हो नहीं जाएगी, इसके लिए हमें काम करना पड़ेगा, मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी, हमारी पूरी टीम जुटेगी आप लोगों के साथ, और हमें आप लोगों के सपोर्ट की बहुत 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 ज्यादा जरूरत पड़ेगी। अभी हम क्या सोच रहे हैं कि कैसे हम अपनी एसआईपी बुक को डबल कर सकते हैं। देखिए, एक चीज तो ये निश्चित है, वन थिंग विच इज वेरी क्लियर इज दैट वी विल हैव टू गेट मोर एंड मोर न्यू एसआईपीस, we will have to get more and more new investors into SIPs, and I think that is what you guys do on a daily basis, because when you go out in the market, try to find out new clients, your own clients give you references of the new clients, and then you go to them and you bring newer SIPs. But we will also have to focus on what we call as solution selling. तो सोल्यूशन सेलिंग से हमारा मतलब ये नहीं है कि हम सिर्फ आप चाहेंगे कि आप हमारा रिटायरमेंट फंड बेचो या आप चिल्ड्रन फंड बेचो, वो तो बेचना ही चाहिए आपको, बिकॉज वो ऐसे फंड्स जो हैं वो इन्वेस्टर के बिहेवियर को मैनेज करने में आपकी बहुत मदद करते हैं। दे हेल्प यू इन टर्म्स ऑफ मैनेजिंग द बिहेवियर ऑफ योर क्लाइंट्स। बट व्हाट इज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट इज कि अगर हमें डबल करनी है, अगर हम सबको अपनी एसआईपी बुक डबल करनी है, तो हमारे को अच्छी तरह से एक स्टोरी बनानी पड़ेगी, हमारे को रिटायरमेंट के आसपास एक स्टोरी बनानी पड़ेगी। रिटायरमेंट एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है इंडियंस के लिए। इंडियंस रिटायरमेंट के बारे में आज इसलिए भी इतना नहीं सोचते हैं कि हमारे यहाँ पे पॉपुलेशन बहुत यंग है, मगर हमें ये बिल्कुल समझना चाहिए कि जिस तरह से एडवांसमेंट ऑफ मेडिकल टेक्नोलॉजी हो रही है, लॉन्जेविटी जिस तरह से इंक्रीज हो रही है, हमको ज्यादा समय तक जीवित रहने के लिए, एक अच्छे लाइफस्टाइल मेंटेन करने के लिए, वी विल हैव टू प्लान आवर रिटायरमेंट मोर इफेक्टिवली, एंड फॉर दैट SIP कैन बी अ वेरी गुड टूल। लार्ज टिकट साइज SIP, longer term SIPs should be our focus. So what we are going to do and what we will request you to do is let us increase the activities that we can do on the ground. Let us try to propagate in a very effective manner, in a storytelling manner, कि भैया you have to plan for your children education, you have to plan for the retirement, you have to plan for the new house that you want to buy after 3 years, after 5 years, you want to plan to buy that new Mercedes, that you have been trying, dreaming of having it ever since you were a kid. So therefore, we will have to increase our activity on ground. Secondly, I think it is very important, or SBI Mutual Fund में we have created a digital tool. आपके जितने भी existing SIPs, all your existing SIP investors, you should send them this link so that they can do a top up in their existing SIPs. That is one thing that all of us, if we start doing, definitely it is going to help increasing or doubling our SIP book. दूसरी चीज, जितने भी नए SIPs आप ले रहे हैं, all the new SIPs that you are taking, do not take any new SIP without a top up. And I will tell you what is the logic behind it. The logic is usually when you look at any client's portfolio, अगर किसी भी client का portfolio आपके पास आता है, उसके अंदर 20-22 म्यूचुअल फंड स्कीम्स होती हैं। अब आप सोचिए 20 स्कीम है, अगर एक स्कीम में 50 भी स्टॉक हैं तो 1000 स्टॉक हो गए। उसमें से अगर आप कॉमन स्टॉक्स निकाल भी दें तो समझो 500 कॉमन स्टॉक्स हैं, वो निकाल दो, यानी उस इंडिविजुअल के पास 500 स्टॉक का पोर्टफोलियो है। क्या वो कभी मार्केट को बीट कर पाएगा? तो यूजुअली क्या होता है, हमारी इनकम ग्रो करती है बट हम एंटीसिपेट नहीं करते। अगर हम टॉप अप SIP का एक कल्चर शुरू से ही इन्वेस्टर के दिमाग में डाल दें, उससे उसका पोर्टफोलियो ज्यादा इफेक्टिव बनेगा, अच्छा बनेगा, रोबस्ट बनेगा, और SIP बुक भी हमारी कॉन्टिन्यूसली इंक्रीज होती रहेगी। इसी तरह से जो मित्र SIP है, जो लॉन्ग टर्म SIP जिसको हम बोलते हैं, कि जब आपके अर्निंग एज है तो आप SIP कीजिए, जब आप रिटायर हो तो आप SWP कीजिए। That can also be a very effective tool of doubling, that will help us in terms of doubling the SIP book. And finally, at SBI Mutual Fund, we have something that we call as multi-select option. Now, in a multi-select option, you can give us one check and you can start 4 SIPs at one go. अभी कई लोग हमें ऐसा बोलते हैं कि भैया हम चारों स्कीम्स एक ही फंड हाउस की नहीं दे सकते। क्यों नहीं दे सकते? क्योंकि ऐसा शायद आपको लगता है कि अगर एक स्कीम खराब होगी, अगर फंड हाउस की एक स्कीम खराब होगी तो सारी स्कीम्स खराब हो जाएंगी। हमने एसबीआई म्यूचुअल फंड में एक जो छोटी सी स्टडी करी है और वो हम आपके साथ शेयर भी करेंगे कि अगर आप एसबीआई म्यूचुअल फंड की स्कीम्स में पोर्टफोलियो ओवरलैप देखो तो वो बहुत कम है। पोर्टफोलियो ओवरलैप कम होने का क्या मतलब है? पोर्टफोलियो ओवरलैप कम होने का मतलब है कि हमारे यहाँ डिफरेंट स्टाइल्स के फंड मैनेजर एग्जिस्ट करते हैं एक ही अम्ब्रेला में, एक ही कंपनी में। यू विल फाइंड R. Srinivasan, who's our CIO equity, who's a quality and a growth investor, and Dinesh Balachandran, who's sitting in front of you, is more of a valuation conscious value investor. So, we have at least 3 to 4 styles, different styles, which are available within our fund house. So therefore, that risk of fund diversification, we believe, does not exist at SBI Mutual Fund. So that multi-select option, one check, 4 SIPs in one shot, you can have a look at that. So basically हमारा यही ऑब्जेक्टिव है कि अगर हम डबलिंग ऑफ एसआईपी की बात जब हम करते हैं तो सिर्फ नया इन्वेस्टर ही नहीं, हमें एग्जिस्टिंग इन्वेस्टर को भी टारगेट करना पड़ेगा। तो आपके जो एग्जिस्टिंग एसआईपीज चल रहे हैं, you will have to put an end to this leaking bucket which we see, कि हम नए एसआईपी लेके आते हैं पर एग्जिस्टिंग एसआईपी सीज हो जाते हैं। तो हमारे को अपने एग्जिस्टिंग डेटाबेस के ऊपर भी काम करना पड़ेगा। और आपके जो एसआईपी एसबीआई म्यूचुअल फंड के साथ चल रहे हैं उसके अंदर जो भी डेटा एनालिटिक्स आपको चाहिए हम आपको करके देंगे। आपको पहले प्री बॉर्न करेंगे, एसआईपी मैच्योर होने से 90 दिन पहले हम आपको पूरा डेटा देंगे, लिंक बना के देंगे, डिजिटल लिंक्स बना के देंगे जो कि आप अपने क्लाइंट्स को भेज सकते हैं और एसआईपी को रिन्यू ऑटोमेटिकली कर सकते हैं। सो बेसिकली मैंने ये समय थोड़ा सा दिनेश से ले लिया। मेरा यही ऑब्जेक्टिव था कि मैं आपको बताऊं कि जो हम ये विजन लेके जो चल रहे हैं कि हमें एसबीआई म्यूचुअल फंड में we have the largest book in the industry in SIP, and the largest player is telling you that they are targeting to double their SIP book. So what my request is, please join us in this journey. We will help you in all possible way so that हमारी SIP book double तभी होगी जब आपकी SIP book double होगी. So let us grow together. I think we are living in very, very exciting times. I will not take any more of your time, and I will hand it over to Dinesh Balachandran, who will share his thoughts with all of you, and he will also talk on SBI Multi-Asset Allocation Fund. Dinesh, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sandeep. I hope everybody is able to hear me.
Yes, Dinesh.
Yeah, okay. Great. तो अगर मैं एक presentation share कर रहा हूँ, I hope this is visible to everyone. So what I thought, before I talk about the SBI Multi-Asset Allocation Fund के बारे में बात करने से पहले, I thought it makes sense to just talk about the economy and where we are, in terms of markets and economy. Before I go over these slides, I'm sure आप सबको याद होगा, exactly 10 years ago, this phrase called taper tantrum came into play. Everywhere in the news. अगर आप 10 साल पहले का अगर news पढ़ोगे, it was there everywhere. TV, media, newspaper, everywhere. Where what happened was, as the US central bank was hiking rates, slowly it became clear that emerging markets are in trouble. And उसमें भी India in particular was considered part of the fragile five. मतलब जो सबसे fragile, जो सबसे weak economies at the time थे, India was considered one of those weak economies, right? So it was one where US में central bank was hiking rates, but the pain was being felt in countries like India. That was the time when our yields shot up, rupee went down like crazy, and equity markets were in deep trouble. So this happened exactly 10 years ago. Now, what is interesting is that even as central banks are hiking rates again, अभी last एक साल में तो आप देखे होंगे कि central banks around the world, be it the US Fed, the ECB in Europe, UK, Japan, फिर भी थोड़ा कम है, but overall across the world, we are seeing, central banks hiking rates. But what is interesting now is that unlike the situation 10 years ago, Abhi, India is at the other end of the spectrum, which means that compared to 10 years ago, when India was part of the fragile five, when India was considered one of the weakest economies, now we are at the opposite end of the spectrum, where India is looking so much better than almost all these economies. So Tabi US economy was doing well, relatively well. So even as the US central bank was hiking rates, अगर आप S&P 500 जो US के जो equity index है, अगर उसका return around that time frame देखोगे, it didn't really perform so poorly because the US economy was strong enough to handle the increase in rates. But this time around, we are now seeing the exact opposite, which is that countries like India are no longer at the center of this crisis. We are no longer at the epicenter of this crisis. हम लोग तो अभी साइड से बस देख रहे हैं कि okay, the central banks have hike rates. Slowly, problems are cropping up in countries like US, UK, even Europe, and meanwhile, we are in a much better position. So it's actually a very nice contrast. 10 साल पहले हम epicenter में थे, US was a bystander. Now US is at the epicenter of this crisis. They are at the center of this crisis. They are feeling the brunt of the hike in rates. Lekin India is in a much better position where we will also get impacted, and I'll talk about that. But unlike the case 10 years ago, we will only suffer slight collateral damage. The problem really is centered in places like US and Europe, which is a complete 180-degree turn from where we were exactly 10 years ago. So I'll go over these slides quickly. Agar aap dekhoge, as I said, over the last year and a half, central banks around the world have hiked rates significantly. Ye aap sabko pata hai ki, and even this week, US Fed again increased rates, right? Now, what is the problem with this? The problem is that वो लोग rates क्यों बढ़ा रहे हैं? Because they want to get inflation under control, because inflation has been running significantly higher. Inflation ka rate agar aap dekhoge, it's been much higher than the 2% band that the US Fed has been thinking about. But agar aap wage growth dekhoge, jo salary growth hai US mein, it is still at much higher levels than where it was over the last several years. So despite so many hikes over the last year or so, wage growth is still holding up, and that is creating a bigger problem for the Fed. Normally क्या होता है, अगर आप 5-6 बार अगर आप rate hike करोगे, तब तक enough weakness starts cropping up in the economy that you are probably close to being done. But now the issue is that despite more than 450 basis points, now it's getting close to 500 basis points of rate hikes that the US Fed has done, the moderation in inflation has been gradual. It has come down. It has definitely started coming down, as you can see in this chart. अगर आप US का जो top left chart है, अगर आप देखोगे उसमें, the CPI जो US का inflation index है, it's coming down, but not as much as where they want it to be. And this is the fundamental problem in these economies, that the embedded inflation is so high that they are forced to do a lot more to bring inflation under control. So when you look at what this means from an economic perspective, अगर वो economy में जो impact in general देखोगे, अभी it is clear that US में जो economic data है, that has definitely the activity index, जो industrial production अगर आप देखोगे, या US PMI जो उनके manufacturing जो index का अगर data देखोगे, वहाँ पे you are beginning to see the effects felt. I'm not even getting into the failure of some of the banks that we've seen. आप लोग देखे होंगे कि US में some of these regional banks, they've started going under, and so the situation definitely is not rosy in a country like US. And this is the big problem from a global perspective, क्योंकि अभी भी US is the biggest economy in the entire world, right? And what happens in US cannot be just restricted to US just because of the sheer size of its economy. And so the problem, अगर global markets के बारे में सोचूं, the number one problem is the fact that a big economy like US is essentially not doing well, and more importantly, the chances of the central bank coming to the rescue anytime soon is rather low. So this is essentially a problem that we are seeing in the developed economies. So पहले लोग सोचते थे कि developed economies, they are so much better. But as I said, times have changed. Now economies like India are in a much better place. The developed economies are showing much more signs of weakness. अगर आप मैं यूएस का डेटा दिखाया, बट अगर आप ग्लोबली यूरोप का भी देखोगे या यूके का देखोगे, like the clearly there is a problem in terms of moderation in activity. But so from a global perspective, I'm worried, frankly speaking. I'm worried that we probably haven't seen the worst yet from a slowdown perspective. Now we have started seeing certain signs of slowdown. अभी जरा economic weakness देखने start किए हैं, but I don't think अभी तक we've seen the worst of it. And the Fed policy normally acts with a lag, right? जो monetary policy hikes होते हैं, वो उसका effect on the economy always happens with a lag. And from that perspective, I'm worried that the अभी जो hikes हुए हैं, उसके effect अभी just second half of this year is when we will actually really feel the effect of those hikes. So that's the problem from a global perspective. अगर मैं इंडिया की बात करूं, India, if you look at the economic activity, it remains healthy till now. हमने color code किया है various indicators relating to the Indian economy, and if you look at it, अगर आप देखोगे, there are a lot of green cells, right, which essentially tells you that India is actually holding up quite well, and this is a big contrast to what we've started seeing in, as I said, countries like US. Now, but what is true is अगर एक momentum होता है, right, for the economy, where growth starts picking up and it gathers steam. Unfortunately for us, the momentum from a growth perspective has started plateauing out, which means that we are now slowly beginning to feel some of the effects of what is going on in other economies. And so while growth still looks good, but it has started plateauing out. So the way we think this will shake out is, even in India, because we can't be immune to what is going on in rest of the world. ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता है. At this point, India has not reached that kind of potential where US में जो भी हो, हमें कुछ फर्क ही नहीं पड़ेगा. We haven't reached that point yet, right? So while on a relative basis, we will still be one of the fastest growing economies. Among the major economies, we will probably be the fastest growing. But from an absolute perspective, we expect towards the, as we go towards the end of this year, we expect the GDP growth to come down. So we do expect India to slow down from a short-term perspective. And this, as I said, is mainly coming from external. जो export growth हैं, जो export related sectors हैं, वहाँ पे we expect a non-trivial slowdown. We expect the activity to moderate quite a bit, and that is going to be the weak link for India at this point. That any export-oriented sector, you have to worry about moderation in activity. So I'll not go into too much detail with respect to these slides because I also wanted to talk about the fund. But एक चीज I'll definitely want to point out कि while I am in the camp that even in India we're going to see a slowdown this year, and the slowdown will become more acute towards the end of this year, this story is a very, very powerful story from a medium-term perspective, which is that जो हम capex cycle की बात करते हैं, जो हम manufacturing activity की बात करते हैं, industrial activity की बात करते हैं, when you look at the tea leaves, so to speak, when you look at all the sort of indicators related to manufacturing or industrial activity, it is becoming very clear that if I just look past this year and think about the next 3 years or next 5 years, अगर मैं अगले 3 साल 5 साल के बारे में अगर मैं सोचूं, this is going to be a fantastic area for India. This is going to be a fantastic opportunity. हमारा जो capex cycle है, I think it has started picking up after a long time. अगर आप ये जो लेफ्ट साइड में जो चार्ट देखोगे, आप देखोगे कि लास्ट 10 years हमारे केपेक्स का जो एनुअल ग्रोथ है, इट्स बीन सो मीडियोकर, इट्स बीन सो बैड, बट नाउ वी आर बिगिनिंग टू टर्न. अभी वी आर बिगिनिंग टू अगेन पिक अप. And if I look at the private sector project announcements, जो right side के जो chart है, जो announcements are basically announcements in terms of the capex plans from private companies, it is now reaching the highest level over the last 10 years. So from a 3 to 5 year perspective, I think this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for India. And this is the part that I am the most excited about. That अगर आप कोई भी cyclical sector देखोगे, उसमें in my opinion growth is going to look very good over the next 3 to 5 years. So notwithstanding all the weakness that we might have, as I said, near term में problem है, global headwinds है, we can't wish it away. If US is going to go through a slowdown, we can't be completely immune. So we will see it, we will feel it. But if I just look past this year's weakness, in my opinion, the story for India remains very, very promising. And I'm saying this from a very objective perspective. Not like I'm not part of the, India always shining camp, because every economy sometimes goes through ups and downs, right? But अगर मैं अभी जो भी data in front of me, अगर मैं ठीक से analyze करूँ, I can't but help think that the next decade belongs to an economy like India, where we are placed in terms of capacity utilization, where we are placed in terms of the balance sheets, where we are placed in terms of the population. I think definitely the next 10 years, it is at least clear to me that we are in a good space, and we should feel good that we are here and we can potentially take advantage of that. So I'll stop the economy slide. Let me go over the asset allocation part, because I think that is also very important. So just give me a second. Let me just open. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about SBI Asset Allocation Fund. Now, why am I talking about this fund? In my opinion, the problem for a lot of investors, if let's assume I tell them कि यार equity is going to give you one of the best possible returns across asset classes over the next 10 years, और अगर आप 10 साल outlook देखोगे, in my opinion equity definitely is going to give the best return. But the problem is the market, the economy doesn't grow in a linear fashion. As I said, this year I am worried that because of the global slowdown and the linkages that we have with respect to our export-oriented companies, I am worried that we will see a growth slowdown this year. And for a lot of investors, even if I tell them that over a 10-year period, you can easily earn a low to mid double-digit return in equities, but then in between you're going to have drawdowns of 15%, or sometimes it can even be higher than that. For a lot of people, that they become very jittery. उनको नहीं देखना है कि उनका portfolio 15% नीचे गिरे, right? And unfortunately in equity markets you have to be prepared for that. And this is where, for investors who are a bit more risk averse, जो investors जो जरा or on the conservative side, for them hybrid funds make all the sense in the world. Where it's not just equity, आप उन्हें equity, and in the case of multi-asset, we will talk about this, it's a combination of equity, debt, and gold. And when you package these three instruments together, it definitely offers a much better solution for a risk-averse investor who is saying that I am okay accepting slightly lower returns, but मुझे drawdown उतना नहीं देखना है. I don't want to see like significant drawdowns that one can see in the equity space. And for them, it makes all the sense in the world to talk about hybrid funds. And within hybrid funds, multi-asset at this point looks even more interesting, mainly because when I think about what is happening in rest of the world, it feels like gold's time to shine is upon us. when I think about some of the problems that the US economy is facing, some of the systemic crisis episodes that can happen in a country like US, it feels like a combination of equity and fixed income should do the job. But with where we are right now, with inflationary pressures not letting up, but weakness is becoming more and more apparent, now it feels like more so than ever, it is time to have a bit of gold in the portfolio as well. It's a good time to have that gold as a hedge, because the thing that gold does best is it acts as a hedge against huge economic uncertainty, and it also acts as a good hedge against inflation. And to me, as I said, based on where we see the developed economies heading towards, we think it is prudent to have a bit of gold at this point in the portfolio. So when I talk about SBI multi-asset fund, it essentially has exposure to 3 asset classes: equity, debt, and gold. So ये तीनों asset class, जो equity, fixed income, gold है, this fund can go anywhere between 10 to 80%. So this fund has leeway where it can essentially, it's a pretty wide range, and we've given that leeway intentionally, where we feel that in an asset allocation fund, if someone does a good job of asset allocation, you can get extra alpha. And from that perspective, we allowed ourselves this leeway of having a range between 10 to 80% in these 3 asset classes. Now, what we also are mindful of, though, is from a taxation perspective, to the extent 35% is an important level in terms of differentiating between 2 different types of taxation. Even let's assume if so we can potentially use arbitrage in conjunction with directional equity, so that we can still get advantage of a better taxation. So that is something we will do in this fund. But the thought process is that equity, we will be market cap agnostic. It can be large cap oriented, it can be more mid cap and small cap oriented, and it will purely be a function of where are the opportunities. Agar opportunities small and mid cap space mein zyada hai to, then we will go in that direction. We will have more of small and mid cap stocks. But if you feel ki small and mid cap stocks mein risk profile has increased a lot and you're not getting paid for that, then we will try to be more in large caps. So it is going to be a function of where are the opportunities. Depending on that, our orientation either towards large cap or towards small caps, it will change, right? On the fixed income side, so debt side, we will have a combination of government bonds and corporate paper. Now, in the case of corporate paper, we'll be mindful that we do not want to take too much credit risk. So the corporate paper here will be basically companies with good risk profile, essentially. And gold, as I said, now more so than ever, having gold in a portfolio actually makes sense. And so we will have exposure to gold. And another thing that we want to do in this fund is we also want to think about overseas securities as well as InvITs and REITs, because these also occasionally give very good opportunities. And at this point, for example, we are actually adding to our InvIT bucket, because we think the yields that we are getting in InvIT now is actually quite attractive. So we want to take advantage of that option as well. International stocks or ETFs, if we are able to get good opportunities, we won't shy away from investing in those stocks as well. But again, it has to make sense. I'm not going to buy an international ETF just for the sake of it. It has to really offer a lot of value. Only then we will essentially go there. But this is a good option to have in this fund. Yeah. So if I think about this, how are we going to do the asset allocation in this fund? So we have a combination of a quantitative framework as well as a qualitative overlay on top of that. So in our quantitative framework, we try to see which asset class is more volatile, and any asset class that is more volatile, we will reduce allocation to that in a systemic fashion, and an asset class that has less volatility, that we will have higher allocation to that. So this is called a risk parity framework, a risk parity model. That is basically what we are going to do, and this is a proven framework to think about asset allocation, and it allows us to think about equity, fixed income, and gold all in one go. And so that is what we are going to do from an asset allocation perspective. So again, I'm trying to keep it simple, but the basic point is this is an objective framework. An objective framework has the advantage of not having greed or fear. Normally, asset allocation, my biggest problem is that when you really need to increase allocation to something, the fear level will be at the highest point. अगर आप COVID के time में सोचोगे, in hindsight, it's very easy to say this, right? That when the COVID crisis happened, that was the time to increase allocation to equities significantly. But tabhi the fear factor was at the highest level. And this is where, forget about the asset allocation framework that I am talking about. Any objective discipline framework has this advantage that you do not think about greed, fear. You do not think कि newspaper में अभी headlines में what is going on. You just try to think about the basic characteristics. Where is the risk highest? Where is the reward highest? And you make the asset allocation change accordingly. And that is what we want to do in our framework as well. So this is like a nice quantitative framework that we have as a backbone for asset allocation. But what we also want to do is we want to give ourselves some leeway on top of that, because kafi baar what we've seen is that you want to give yourself some leeway on top of a pure quant framework, and that is what we've done, where we've said that जो भी framework से जो output हमें मिलेगा in terms of recommended allocation, plus or minus 10% leeway we will give ourselves based on our understanding of macroeconomic conditions, and so that much leeway we give ourselves beyond whatever allocation we get from the quant framework, right? And so we have this asset allocation committee. Firm, we have this asset allocation committee that meets once every month. Every month, we have essentially the CIO, the head of equity, head of fixed income, people from other departments as well, and there is a nice discussion that goes on, and so that is also used to fine tune in terms of whether there are times when we want to have an overlay beyond what the framework is suggesting. So that is the qualitative assessment part, above and beyond whatever quantitative framework we are using for this fund. So just to give an example, like how will this work, right? अगर आप 2007-2008 अगर वो period अगर देखोगे, right? So here I've plotted the three asset classes. One is equity, which we know, like 2007 mein equities did phenomenally well, right? So the Sensex in from 2005 to 2008 beginning, it more than tripled. Gold also did well, but clearly not as well as equity, and bonds did essentially were very subdued in that time frame. So, but lekin what happened was, by the time 2007 end happened, the volatility of equities, equity asset class went up significantly. So even though returns were good, but the realized volatility in terms of day-to-day movements, it started going up significantly. And for us, as I said, the allocation is based on the volatility of each asset class. When an asset class becomes more volatile, automatically we will reduce our allocation to that asset class. And so in this framework, even as equities did well till Jan of 2008, much before that, this framework would have reduced the allocation, because it would have said that यार equity is becoming much more risky. इसमें अभी definitely risk काफी बढ़ गया है, and so we would have shifted towards bonds which had the lowest volatility at that point, right? And so that is essentially how this framework works. In general, what we've seen is this: asset allocation में there are times when equities do very well. Normally, अगर मैं एक growth versus inflation अगर मैं axis frameworks अगर मैं सोचूंगा, when growth is looking up and inflation is also okay, or it's high but not too high, equities do the best. On the other hand, when growth is very weak but inflation is also very low, debt clearly does the best. When you have growth slowing down but inflation is still not low, that is when gold shines, right? And we've seen that even agar last 15-20 saal if I just think about Indian markets, we've seen this in India. In the 2003 to 2007 period, equities did best. Why? Because growth was very good. Uske baad jo crash hua, obviously inflation fell off a cliff and growth also fell off a cliff. Bonds did well. Uske baad there was a period between 2010 and 2012 where inflation was high but growth was not looking good, and that was a time frame where gold did well. So this is something that we all want to think about, that depending on the environment, you want to have more or less allocation to each of these asset classes. And at the beginning of my presentation, I spoke about that gold now more so than ever, because it feels like we are reaching a regime where growth is slowing down, but inflation is going to remain a problem, particularly core inflation. This is the kind of environment where gold does the best, right? And so having that gold as part of the asset allocation definitely helps. And that is why we feel that while this is supposed to be an all-weather fund, right? This is not supposed to be a fund meant only for certain periods. It is supposed to do a good job of asset allocation all the time. But I'm just pointing out how having that extra asset class at this point is definitely going to differentiate this fund and is going to help out this fund. And that is something that we are beginning to see essentially. So why invest in SBI multi-asset allocation fund? You are getting exposure to 3 asset classes: equity, fixed income, and gold. On top of that, we also want potential. We think of InvITs and REITs as a slightly different instrument. We will potentially invest in that as well. International diversification, if it makes sense, we have the leeway to do that. So we can do that. And what it all means is that this fund is meant for people who are not looking for return maximization, who are thinking about, I want good returns. I want returns better than FD for sure, but I don't want to take too much risk. And risk का क्या मतलब है यहाँ पे? That drawdowns. I don't want significant drawdowns. And to me, this combination of equity, fixed income, and gold, I think it is essentially going to do that job of leading to good risk-adjusted returns. And so that is why we are actually excited about this fund at this point. And what I'll say is this: we will do our best in terms of making sure that from an asset allocation alpha perspective, we will try to generate good alpha from asset allocation, because in this fund that doing that rebalancing on a timely basis is important. And so that is something that we want to do. And we think that we have the framework that will allow us to do that. And so that is something that we feel good about in this fund. Now, in terms of what has actually happened over the last 12 months, this is essentially what we are showing. As I said, each of this asset class, we have leeway to go from 10 to 80%. The range that I'm showing, जो range मैं बता रहा हूँ, this is the range जो arrow से marked है. This is the range over the last 12 months. Debt over the last 12 months, we've gone from anywhere between 30% and 60%. And abhi jo April end, jo latest available public information hai, we are at the lower end of that range. And the reason is, as I said, we've been able to identify InvITs which are now offering. So InvITs, we are not putting it in the debt category. We think of it as a separate category. And cash also, we put it in a separate category. We don't put it in debt. The combination of cash and InvIT has now gone up, and that has eaten into the fixed income bucket, जो कि ज़्यादा duration bucket या corporate bonds के papers हैं. That bucket has come down. The cash plus InvIT component has gone up, right? And equity, if you look at it, equity weight has gone over the last year, last 12 months की बात कर रहा हूँ, has gone anywhere between 27% to 54%, and as of April end, we were at 43%. Gold has essentially gone from 12% to 15%. And we are in the middle of that. So that is the history over the last 12 months. And what you can see is, for us, moving between these asset classes based on where the return adjusted for risk appears the best is something that we are going to do in a dynamic fashion. So that is something we'll do diligently, and we'll do it actively. This is the portfolio positioning in terms of, when I look at equity versus GSEC, across asset types, you can see that we have a nice mix of equity, GSEC, corporate bonds, gold, InvIT, and even within equity, you can see that at this point, the fund has more mid cap and small cap relative to its history, where because abhi hame lagta hai ki there are opportunities, particularly after the correction that we saw over the last few months. Opportunities opened up in the small and mid cap space, and so now we have a good allocation to small cap and mid cap stocks. But this allocation will change over time. It depends on where the opportunities are. Agar opportunities large cap stocks mein better hai, so we will go there. But post the correction that we've seen over the last year or so, opportunities are emerging in small and mid cap stocks, and so we have increased our allocation in those stocks. So I'll stop here and hand it over to Sandeep. Sandeep, how do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, sure. So we have a lot of questions also, which have come up. So I will try to take the questions, and हम जो है unmute भी कर सकते हैं, आप लोग अपने हाथ भी खड़े कर सकते हैं, and we can take your questions there also. One question from my side first before I move on to the questions which are there. So Dinesh, multi-asset, as you explained, one distinct advantage is that you have a good diversification in terms of the assets that you are holding in one fund. So one fund gives you exposure into equity, debt, and gold.
Yeah.
So the present kind of market that we are in, markets, although there has been a very decent rally in the last 2 weeks, but otherwise, when we hear fund managers, they are not very constructive. So in this kind of a market, do you feel this is a better product because it's a good combination? So means, why would you suggest this fund at this point in time?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say two things. One, like, agar main sochun, like, to me, a fund like this is actually an all-weather fund for certain investors. So it's not about right now that I would market this fund, because, as I said, एक होते हैं investors who are looking for return maximization. तो वो investors, I think, अभी at this point have become very mature. उन्हें समझ में आता है कि equity markets can offer significant drawdowns at times, and they have the capacity and wherewithal to handle that, right? And so for those investors, it makes sense to market pure equity funds, because they are very clearly stating that यार मुझे बीच में अगर कुछ correction होता है तो I don't mind, as long as मेरा medium term and long term जो expectations है, जो whatever objectives I have in mind, if they are getting met. But I know, and I talk to a lot of people who are worried about interim corrections, right? Like even अगर if you think about it, last year and a half, equity market में ऐसा उतना कुछ correction नहीं हुआ है. It has not been something very significant. But even within that, so many people have expressed concern. अरे यार market में क्या हो रहा है यार, return नहीं आ रहा है and correction हो रहा है, like I'm seeing drawdowns, and that is true for a lot of people. And so the problem is, if for some reason we see, I mean, COVID, though it was a very significant correction, but let's assume in general you see even a 15% or 20% correction in at the index level. This is not uncommon. We've seen this several times, right? Then these people then panic at the wrong time and potentially will sort of get out of investing in the capital markets. And from that perspective, I reiterate that for conservative investors, जो risk averse हैं, जो बता रहे हैं कि यार मुझे जरा extra return चाहिए, but I don't want too much volatility. A fund like this is an all-weather fund. You buy it, you hold it. We will do the job of asset allocation for you. We will make sure that I can't promise no drawdowns. There is no way I can promise, right? But what I can say is, to the best extent of my ability, I will try to minimize the drawdowns, so that the drawdowns compared to what we see in an equity index in this fund should definitely be lower. And from that perspective, if someone has invested money in this, अगर बीच में कभी कुछ correction अगर होता है, they are not going to panic. They are going to be fine. The returns, it will be somewhere, it obviously will not be the same as a pure equity fund return, but will it be much better than an FD return? I think so. And if that is what someone is okay with, perfect. You buy this fund, honestly forget about it, you're going to be okay. Now when we talk about tactical, which is a question that you asked, in terms of, but let's assume that people who think about various market scenarios and who are then trying to decide, yeah, for the time being, what product makes sense. And there I would say that at this point, this fund all the more makes sense, even compared to other hybrid funds, for example, mainly because if I think about what is the single biggest risk from a global perspective, it is this risk that the central banks will overdo things because core inflation is not coming down quickly enough, which means that these guys are forced to stay hawkish for too long. And we are already beginning to see accidents emerge. पहले तो लगा था कि Silicon Valley Bank, that's just an outlier, right? And then we saw First Republic go down. Now we are hearing about PacWest, and there are a bunch of other regional banks in the queue. And so the Fed is caught in a dilemma. If they turn, if let's assume they say, nahi yaar, hame to banks ko bachana hai, and so we need to do something there. The moment they do a pivot, then inflation will again go out of control. Then all sorts of commodities will again start shooting higher. And that is a dilemma at this point. And this is where gold comes in. Gold does perfectly well in this kind of scenario, where there is economic uncertainty, inflation is not completely coming under control. For it to truly come under control, you will have to overdo things so much that it is going to lead to economic accidents, right? And that uncertainty is what makes something like gold. And I'm no gold bug, by the way. I'm not someone who actually in general recommends gold. I'm more of a equity cash flow kind of guy. But even I have to admit that the outlook at this point does look promising for something like gold. And that is why, even from a short-term perspective, someone is thinking more near-term in terms of, yeah, what can potentially do well. This fund, in my opinion, honestly stands out. And it can be some other multi-asset fund as well. But I mean, we think we have a good framework. So I'll be talking about SBI multi-asset fund. I do think that because of the uncertainty, and uncertainty to hamesha hota hai. There is never a certain moment in markets or economies. But in terms of what are the major driving forces behind the uncertainty, at this point, it feels like gold is favorably poised. And from that perspective, having gold as part of your allocation mix, in my opinion, is definitely going to help, either from an alpha perspective or even the worst case scenario, just from a diversification, risk adjusted perspective, essentially.
Right. So when we are so positive on gold, and one of the question, a couple of guys have asked the same question, which is none of the multi-asset allocation funds have a decent allocation to gold, merely 10-15%. So
Right.
if we are so confident and our view on gold is so constructive, then why most of the funds have the allocation in the range of 10-15% only, whereas they can go higher?
Right. Yeah. So one reason is, till now, fixed income was also offering a good alternative. When I think about last year, right, yields towards the middle of last year went up, where I remember the 30-year yield, 30-year GSEC, the yield became very close to 8%. I think एक auction, the 30-year GSEC yield went above 790, right? Those are good levels. Those are levels that in general you want to be attracted towards. And so it's always it's like a tug of war between these various asset classes in terms of what looks particularly attractive. Now, when I think about last year, because the Fed was just in the process of hiking rates, and normally जब interest rates बढ़ाते हैं, तो real yields start going up, right? And real yields, in general, all else being equal, is not, in real yields going up is not so positive for gold. So at that time, fixed income looked like a better alternative. And that is why we still had, I can't speak for other funds, but when I think about our framework and what it was suggesting and what we did, we thought it's first important to get the fixed income rally first, right? Capture fixed income. So if you look at the allocation in fixed income, the range was pretty big over the last year. So we wanted to capture the rally in fixed income. We wanted to first be in fixed income. But now that yields have come down in fixed income, we are essentially increasing our, so we are increasing our allocation to gold. So that is something that is happening. And then we also now have the option of InvITs, which is also an attractive option. Because agar InvITs sochoge, particularly some of these road-related InvITs, it has an embedded inflation hedge feature, because the toll revenue is linked to the inflation index, which means that if inflation goes up, your revenue actually goes up. So that is also another way to hedge inflation risk. So we are going to be completely objective about it. Jahan pe hame risk return skewed in our favor lagta hai, we will go there. So at this point, fixed income, yes, it still looks okay, but like, does it look as exciting as where it was last year? Maybe not. And so now we are increasingly going towards InvITs and gold, essentially.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions, so I'll just hurry up. So what is the equity debt combination right now, and how frequently will you rebalance the portfolio?
Yeah. So the allocation as of last month end is what I can talk about.
Yeah.
You can see that on the screen, where you will look at it. Equity is around 43%, fixed income is 30%, gold is 12%, and the remaining is a combination of cash, which is basically front end, jo hame repo, jo CBLO rate jo milta hai, we get that, which is also which has become actually much more attractive, and InvITs. So the remaining is in that. So that is the allocation as of last month end.
And rebalancing, how frequently?
Yeah, and the rebalancing here, what we do is we try to rebalance this on a monthly frequency. What we've said is that if there are, and that there is nothing that prevents us from doing it more regularly, but it's just that काफी बार वो just noise होता है. We can run this model every day, but there is often noise that creeps in, and sometimes it's better to reduce some of this noise. नहीं तो ऐसे ही churn करते हो without any real value addition, right? So when we did our back testing, we realized that monthly rebalancing works fine. What we've said is, if there is a very big market movement intra-month, then we will not wait till month end. Then we will run the model. So for example, if equity markets move by more than 10% intra-month, then we will not wait till the month end. We will run the model at that point, and whatever it suggests, we will take that into consideration.
Okay, in terms of tax efficiency, so we know as per SID, there is a broader range, but what's the thought that you run in your mind? Can it have that indexation thing on the debt side,
Yeah.
which probably requires a minimum equity investment of 25%?
Right. Yeah. So that is something we are cognizant of, and we want to take advantage of that. Now, the nice part is through a combination of arbitrage, where it's a different type of instrument as opposed to directional equity. Through a combination of arbitrage and directional equity, we can get to 35%. So that is something we can easily do. So from that perspective, I will be committed to keeping it above 35%, even though the directional equity risk sometimes can be even less than that. But as we speak, anyway, even the directional equity component is at 43%. So we are above the 35%.
Okay. Okay, then you also manage Balance Advantage Fund, and although this fund has one additional asset class, so is it BAF plus one, or is it at par, or how do you look at this fund?
Yeah. To me, essentially, as I said, the gold feature, I think it definitely adds to the diversification aspect. In fact, I don't have that slide here with me where we show. Let me just try to pull that up, if you don't mind waiting for.
Sure.
Just 1 second, please. We have something where we wanted to show how gold has worked compared to equity and fixed income over the last 15 odd years. Just 1 second, okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you see this? Is this visible?
I think it's coming on right now.
Acha, wait. Yeah.
I cannot see it. If somebody can write in the chat box.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Yeah. Hopefully. Nahi aa raha hai?
Yeah, it's
okay, let me actually, you know what? Yeah, let me do this. Yeah, just 1 second. No? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can see this, right?
Yeah.
This is essentially how gold has done over the. Oh, wait.
No. This we are seeing only the old slide, I think. Debt equity.
Let me. Oh, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, now we can see. Yes.
Yeah. So if you look at this, right, this is essentially a slide that shows how each asset class has performed over the last 15 years. And you can see how it's been a very interesting mix of years where equity did really well, and then years where a couple of years where debt actually did well, debt and even cash, and then years where gold has done well. And this speaks to the asset allocation that I was talking about, that there is definitely an advantage to having gold. Will it work all the time? No, absolutely not. But does it provide good diversification? The answer is yes. And the way I think about it, adding gold to the mix is definitely a nice diversification enhancer. I think it improves the fund more from a risk-adjusted perspective than anything else. And so, in my opinion, all else being equal, this definitely has that added benefit.
Yeah. I can go to the next question, Dinesh.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Indexation benefit, I've already shared what we think. So we can open the question and answers for the people who have raised their hands. So if somebody can help me in unmuting Mr. Madhukar. Prachi, can you help me in unmuting Mr. Madhukar?
जी नमस्कार सर।
Yeah,
हाँ जी
namaskar.
मधुकर जी।
जी नमस्कार।
नमस्कार जी।
सर मैं ये कह रहा था कि सर अभी हम लोग फोकस इक्विटी फंड और हाइब्रिड इक्विटी फंड लेके थोड़ा चिंतित हैं, क्योंकि फोकस इक्विटी फंड एक ऐसा फंड था और जिसमें हम लोग ताल ठोक के बोलते थे कि अच्छा रिटर्न दे रहा है, देगा, लेकिन सर इधर थोड़ा चिंतित हो गए हैं उसके रिटर्न को देख के। दूसरी बात, सीनियर सिटीजन के लिए हम लोग के पास एक बहुत अच्छा ऑप्शन था सर, और इनफैक्ट फंड अच्छा भी कर रहा था हाइब्रिड इक्विटी, तो वो भी थोड़ा सा सर इधर कुछ गड़बड़ा गया है, तो सर कुछ कहना चाहेंगे?
Dinesh, you will take, and I can also take a little bit.
Yeah, you want to start? I can add.
Okay, fine,
yeah.
fine. तो ऐसा है मधुकर जी, देखिए कि फोकस्ड इक्विटी फंड का अगर आज भी आप थोड़ा लंबा समय का रिटर्न देखें तो वो अच्छा ही है, बट आपको ध्यान में रखना होगा कि अगर आप फोकस्ड इक्विटी फंड का पोर्टफोलियो आज भी देखते हैं और आप देखिए उसमें क्या स्टॉक्स हैं, मैं एक चीज आपको निश्चित रूप से कह सकता हूं कि कोई भी स्टॉक ऐसा आपको हर स्टॉक देखकर अच्छा ही लगेगा कि अच्छा इसके अंदर प्रॉक्टर एंड गैम्बल है, अच्छा इसमें डिवीज लैब है। सो देखिए पिछले 10 सालों में 2011 से लेकर 2020 तक क्वालिटी जो स्टॉक्स थे, हाई ग्रोथ स्टॉक्स जो थे वो काफी चले थे, मगर 2020 आते आते जो ट्रेंड है वो मार्केट का चेंज हुआ और वैल्यू स्टॉक्स ने काफी अच्छे तरीके से कम बैक करे। और मार्केट्स आप आई एम श्योर काफी समय से मार्केट्स में आप काम कर रहे होंगे और आपने ये देखा होगा कि मार्केट्स हमेशा साइकिल्स के अंदर बिहेव करती हैं। तो हमारे को पूरा विश्वास है, और डीपी सर ने शुरुआत में ही बोला, ये अगर आप पिछले 3 महीने में देखें, 3 महीने बहुत कम समय होता है, फंड जो है 10 साल के अंदर आज भी अच्छा कर रहा है, 7 साल में आज भी अच्छा कर रहा है, बट उसकी पिछली 1-1.5 साल की अंडर परफॉर्मेंस के कारण वो अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है आपको, मगर फंड कम बैक करना शुरू कर रहा है। आप प्लीज पेशेंट रहिए। आई एम श्योर दोनों फंड्स जो आपने बताए, दोनों आर श्रीनिवासन के फंड हैं जो कि हमारे सीआईओ हैं इक्विटी के, बहुत लंबे समय से वो हमारे साथ एसोसिएटेड हैं और बहुत अच्छा स्टॉक पिकिंग एबिलिटी है उनके अंदर, तो विश्वास रखिए। हमें समझ में आ रहा है कि थोड़ी सी तकलीफ होती है जब अंडर परफॉर्मेंस 1-1.5-2 साल का होता है, बट मैंने आपको बताने की कोशिश करी कि बिकॉज स्टाइल चेंज हुआ है मार्केट के अंदर, इसलिए ऐसी। और दूसरा चीज क्या हुआ, हमारे पास फॉरेन स्टॉक्स उसमें काफी थे और सारे हाई ग्रोथ वाले फॉरेन स्टॉक्स थे, जिधर भी हमने देखा है कि यूएस मार्केट में भी, नैस्डैक के अंदर भी काफी सिवियर करेक्शन हुआ है और उसके कारण भी रिटर्न्स के ऊपर इंपैक्ट पड़ा। पर हमें बहुत पूरा विश्वास है कि वासन विल कम बैक, ही हैज ऑलरेडी स्टार्टेड कमिंग बैक। अगर आप देखें वाईटीडी बेसिस पे जनवरी से लेकर अब तक आप रिटर्न अगर इनका देखेंगे तो काफी इंप्रूव हुआ है हिस्टोरिकली पिछले 1-1.5 साल से, तो प्लीज विश्वास रखिए। दिनेश, यू वुड लाइक टू ऐड समथिंग?
मतलब अगर आप यूएस स्टॉक्स के बारे में अगर बात कर रहे हो, yes, last year US stocks तो like did very poorly, मतलब the US markets underperformed, तो काफी stocks 20-30-40% के लगभग गिरे and they underperformed. But अगर last 4 महीना अगर आप देखोगे, the kind of move higher in the same stocks. So last year लोगों को Nvidia बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं था, जबकि Nvidia has always been a fantastic company. I mean, no doubt about it, right? But लेकिन partly because of valuation, partly because of over ownership, partly because of economy and stuff like that, Nvidia didn't do well at all. But abhi dekho, Nvidia has been one of the best performers. Microsoft, which we did very poorly last year, has started doing extremely well. And this is the nature of the beast. अगर equities अगर आप सोचोगे, यही मैं बता रहा था कि equities में है कि over any medium to long term horizon, in most stocks, as long as एक basic up एक filter लगाए हो in terms of quality and governance, you are going to be fine in a significant majority of these stocks. But can these stocks show drawdown over shorter time frame? The answer is yes. And unfortunately, no one can wish it away. No matter how hard I or Vasan or anyone else, how we try, we cannot wish it away. It is going to happen. In fact, that is part of the reason why equities deliver high returns over longer time frame. It is to compensate for the higher risk. So, frankly speaking, the one person that I have the most respect for from a fund management perspective is R. Srinivasan. And I'm not saying this because he's my boss. I genuinely respect him. I genuinely admire him. And if there is one person that I can say, yaar, bilkul tension mat lo, it will be with respect to funds managed by him. And I say this with utmost honesty.
थैंक यू मधुकर जी। और सेम इज ट्रू फॉर जो आपने दूसरा फंड भी बोला, प्लीज थोड़ा पेशेंस रखिए। मार्केट साइकिल्स के जैसे चेंज होती हैं तो थोड़ा सा ऊपर नीचे होता है। हमारे यहाँ पे अगर मैं आपको यही बोल रहा हूँ, आप मेरे हाइब्रिड इक्विटी का भी पोर्टफोलियो देखिए, आप एक स्टॉक आपको एक कॉन्फिडेंस देगा। सो प्लीज अपने इन्वेस्टर्स को भी होल्ड करके रखिए, आप भी विश्वास रखिए हम पे। थैंक यू।
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So we can move on to Mr. Sukumar Burman. And before we move on to Mr. Sukumar, there is one question on the Facebook, on the YouTube, by Mr. K. Karki, and he's asking कि SBI का कौन सा SIP सही होगा। सो अगर आप मुझसे पूछे तो मेरा इन्वेस्टमेंट मेरे SIPs SBI में चलते हैं। तो मेरा आज का फेवरेट जो मेरे दो सिप हैं वो हैं SBI कॉन्ट्रा फंड और SBI लार्ज एंड मिड कैप फंड। और ये किसी भी इन्वेस्टर के लिए, बिकॉज डाइवर्सिफाइड पोर्टफोलियोज हैं। कॉन्ट्रा जो है वो थोड़ा सा स्लाइटली हम बोलेंगे रिस्की है, क्योंकि वहां पे आपको समय ज्यादा देना होगा। रिस्की इस हिसाब से नहीं कि हम कुछ उसमें इंफीरियर स्टॉक्स लेते हैं, बट स्ट्रैटेजी जिस तरह से दिनेश मैनेज करते हैं उसके अंदर आपको समय देना होगा, कम से कम 5 साल का समय हो तो ही आप उस फंड में आइए। और सिमिलरली लार्ज एंड मिड कैप है, वो भी एक डाइवर्सिफाइड फंड है। इन दोनों फंड्स को आप देख सकते हैं SIP करने के लिए। सो मिस्टर सुकुमार बर्मन, कैन वी अनम्यूट हिम?
हेलो।
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
हाँ सर।
बोलिए बर्मन साहब, बोलिए।
हाँ सर, आवाज आ रहा है मेरा?
आ रहा है भाई साहब।
सर, महीने में मेरे को 2 लाख रुपया कमीशन ये करना, तो कितना करके ये करना पड़ेगा सर?
महीने में आप 2 लाख रुपया कमीशन कमाना चाहते हैं?
जी सर, जी सर।
आप कहाँ से बात कर रहे हैं बर्मन जी?
मैं वेस्ट बंगाल से बात कर रहा हूँ, मालदा जो ब्रांच है।
अरे मालदा में हमारे ब्रांच मैनेजर से जाके मिलिए, वो पूरा आपको प्लान करके देंगे। मालदा में हमारी ब्रांच है।
हाँ, और एक चीज चाहिए सर मेरे को, जो SBI म्यूचुअल फंड का जो प्रचार करने के लिए जो मतलब बैनर वगैरह सब कुछ ये चाहिए, ठीक है? इसके लिए कहाँ ये करना पड़ेगा सर? वही
ब्रांच मैनेजर जो है हमारी मालदा ब्रांच के, कैन यू जस्ट आस्क हिज नेम? मैं अभी नाम भी आपको बोल दूंगा, तो वो आप उनसे जाके मिलिए। मिस्टर विकास हैं, अगर मैं सही सोच पा रहा हूं तो आप प्लीज SBI म्यूचुअल फंड की ब्रांच में जाके मिलिए, वो आपको पूरी हेल्प करेंगे।
ठीक है सर, थैंक यू सर।
मिस्टर ब्रिज मोहन, कैन यू अनम्यूट मिस्टर ब्रिज मोहन प्लीज? द ब्रांच मैनेजर का नाम है बर्मन साहब मिस्टर विकास सरकार।
I think he's still on mute.
मिस्टर ब्रिजमोहन जी, आप अभी म्यूट पे हैं, अनम्यूट कीजिए अपने आप को और अपना सवाल पूछिए प्लीज। मिस्टर ब्रिजमोहन, आपको अनम्यूट करना पड़ेगा अपने हैंडसेट से। देन लेट्स मूव ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट कॉलर, मिस्टर उमेश हेडे।
हेलो।
या
हेलो।
यस सर,
हाँ, गुड इवनिंग सर।
गुड इवनिंग जी।
दिस
उमेश
इज
जी बोल रहे हैं?
हाँ सर, दिस इज उमेश आड़े फ्रॉम अमरावती, महाराष्ट्र।
जी बताइए उमेश जी।
सर, क्या सर डेट फंड में अभी इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए सर? अभी निवेश करना चाहिए, क्योंकि जबकि इंटरेस्ट बेनिफिट अभी 1 अप्रैल से बंद हो गए हैं।
देखिए, ये तो वही बात हो गई कि जब हम खाना खाते हैं तो एक बैलेंस डाइट खाते हैं ना सर, दाल खाते हैं, सब्जी खाते हैं,
ओके।
रोटी खाते हैं, चावल खाते हैं।
ओके सर।
तो अगर वो सही है तो डेट में इन्वेस्ट करना तो पड़ेगा ही सर। सिर्फ टैक्सेशन के बेसिस पे आप ये डिसाइड नहीं कर सकते कि आपको किसी एसेट क्लास को छोड़ देना चाहिए। डेट का अपना एक महत्व है पोर्टफोलियो में। जैसा कि अभी थोड़ी देर पहले दिनेश आपको बता रहे थे, हम मल्टी एसेट फंड क्यों बेचना चाह रहे हैं। मल्टी एसेट फंड हम इसीलिए बेच रहे हैं कि उसमें इक्विटी भी है, डेट भी है, गोल्ड भी है। तो अगर आप स्टैंड अलोन बेसिस पे डेट नहीं बेचना चाहते तो कम से कम हाइब्रिड फंड्स देखिए। आप इक्विटी हाइब्रिड देखिए, इक्विटी सेविंग्स देखिए, मल्टी एसेट फंड देखिए, बैलेंस एडवांटेज फंड देखिए। पर डेट का एक्सपोजर हर पोर्टफोलियो में होना ही चाहिए।
ओके सर, ओके, थैंक यू, थैंक यू।
धन्यवाद धैर्य जी। कैन वी अनम्यूट मिस्टर राजीव रंजन सिंह? राजीव जी, अपना सवाल पूछिए प्लीज। राजीव रंजन सिंह जी, हमने अनम्यूट कर दिया आपको, प्लीज अपना सवाल पूछिए। ओके, लेट्स मूव ऑन। मिस्टर सुमंत साहा, कैन यू प्लीज अनम्यूट मिस्टर सुमंत साहा?
So my question is, how much business is come from bank side and how much from MFDs?
आप एसबीआई म्यूचुअल फंड के लिए पूछ। देखिए सर, अगर आप हमारा अच्छा, मैं सुमंता जी, अगर मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँ यही सवाल, आपको क्या लगता है कितना आ रहा होगा अगर?
I think 80% is from bank side.
ये बिल्कुल आपका अजम्पशन जो है गलत है। सुमंता जी, मैं आपको एक फैक्ट बताता हूँ। देखिए, हमें बहुत प्राउड है कि हम एसबीआई हमारा पेरेंट है और हमें सपोर्ट मिलता है, जैसे कि आईसीआईसीआई को मिलता है, जैसे कि एचडीएफसी को मिलता है। हमारा जो टोटल एयूएम है वो आज की डेट में 7,54,000 करोड़ का है। हमने कल ही 7,50,000 करोड़ का मार्क क्रॉस किया और एसबीआई का कंट्रीब्यूशन इस टोटल एयूएम में 20% है, सिर्फ 20% है। और आप बोल रहे हैं कि 80% मेरे को पैसा एसबीआई से आता है। ऐसा नहीं है सर। हमारे टोटल एयूएम में जो एमएफडी कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो तकरीबन 22% का है, 22%। सुमंता जी, आई होप आई हैव रिप्लाइड टू योर क्वेश्चन।
Yes.
Thank you. So, can we unmute Mr. Sanjeev Patni?
हेलो।
हाँ जी संजीव जी, बताइए।
सर नमस्कार।
नमस्कार जी।
सर मैं कोटा राजस्थान से।
जी बताइए बताइए।
सर ये जो इंटरनेशनल जो अपना फंड है सर, ये इसको क्या समय लगेगा, क्या लगेगा सर इसमें एफओएफ जो है?
उसमें सर ऐसा है कि इसमें हम कुछ कर नहीं सकते ज्यादा, बिकॉज आरबीआई ने रिस्ट्रिक्शन लगाई है। एक जो टोटल जो एक लिमिट थी वो क्रॉस हो गई है। कलेक्टिवली म्यूचुअल फंड्स जो इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं फॉरेन स्टॉक्स में, तो अभी जब तक आरबीआई ये लिमिट को हटाएगा नहीं तब तक कोई कुछ कर नहीं सकता।
अच्छा अच्छा। और एक अपना ही सर बेफ एफडी के कंपैरिजन में कब तक आ जाएगा?
कब तक आ जाएगा मतलब? आपने एक साल का बैफ का रिटर्न देखा है? नंबर 1 फंड है सर एक साल में।
वो आपके रिटर्न देखते हो सर, हमारे रिटर्न तो कम ही दिखते हैं सर, आपके रिटर्न ज्यादा दिखते होंगे।
कैसे? अगर आपने कैसे, ये कैसे हो सकता है? अगर किसी ने, अगर आपके किसी इन्वेस्टर ने, आई एम श्योर आपने इन्वेस्ट करवाया होगा पैसा जब एनएफओ आया था।
तो 6.7 या 6.6% का रिटर्न आ रहा है।
हाँ तो सर अभी एक ही साल हुआ है ना सर, मतलब
हम्म।
आपको समय तो देना पड़ेगा ना मार्केट के अंदर। और मार्केट ने एक साल में क्या रिटर्न दिया है। मे बी दिनेश वाला यहाँ पे बैठे हैं, दिनेश ही मैनेज कर रहे हैं उस फंड को। मैं दिनेश जी से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि वो आपको जवाब दें।
या सो अगर आप देखोगे, सो इन टर्म्स ऑफ व्हेन दिस फंड वाज लॉन्च, ये फंड का जो एनएफओ हुआ था दैट वाज इन अगस्त एंड, इफ आई रिमेंबर करेक्टली, अगस्त एंड 2021. And अगर आप देखोगे निफ्टी hit its peak just a month later, like I think in early October it hit a peak, and since then वो जो निफ्टी का जो लेवल था, we haven't even hit that level yet, right? Which means that equities अगर आप देखोगे as represented by Nifty index या Sensex index, they have actually अभी जो level है, it is still below the level where it was in October 2021. सो एंड ये तो मैं पहले भी बता रहा था कि इक्विटी, इनफैक्ट जो पीछे जो स्क्रीन में जो ग्राफ है वो भी यही एग्जैक्टली बताता है कि इक्विटीज हर साल आपको वो डबल डिजिट रिटर्न नहीं देने वाला है।
डबल डिजिट नहीं सर, पर इसको क्या एफडी के कंपैरिजन में भी अगर 1.5 साल हो गया तो अगर आना चाहिए सर।
वही मैं बता रहा हूँ कि 1.5 साल बहुत कम टाइम फ्रेम है, क्योंकि अगर मैं इक्विटीज उसमें नेगेटिव रिटर्न दिया है फिर भी हम एक्चुअली वी आर एट 6.7%, दैट मींस किधर तो खुश तो ही है आई गेस। एंड इफ यू आस्क मी, मेरा रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन इससे ज्यादा है क्या? आंसर इज यस, एंड यू आर राइट इन डिमांडिंग हायर रिटर्न्स, बट लेकिन यू आल्सो हैव टू रियलाइज दैट ईयर और ईयर एंड अ हाफ, अनफॉर्चुनेटली वो टाइम फ्रेम इज टू शॉर्ट। नॉर्मली हम बोलते हैं कि कोई भी परफॉर्मेंस, कोई भी फंड, मेरा फंड, किसी और के फंड, मुझे लगता है कि आप मिनिमम 3 साल दो, क्योंकि लेस देन 3 इयर्स में ना वो इकोनॉमिक, देयर आर सो मेनी फैक्टर्स जो हमारे कंट्रोल में नहीं है, दोस कम इन, and from that perspective it becomes difficult to talk about whether a fund is doing well or not. What I can say is this: compared to most other funds, have we done better? I think the answer is yes. Have we done on par with FD at this point? Yes. Should we do better than FD? The answer again is yes. But just give us some more time. I am confident that if you look at the fund over any rolling 3-year period, the return should definitely be higher than FD. That is something that we also internally set as a benchmark, that over any कोई भी 3 साल के period है, वो 3 साल period में we should definitely give returns better than FD. But you also have to realize that the last year and a half, equity markets in general, just वो point to point अगर मैं देखूं, the last year and a half, just right on the fund launch, equity markets peaked, and the Nifty is still at level lower than where it was. So that definitely has acted as a drag. But as we show, ये ग्राफ में जैसे दिखा रहे हैं, निफ्टी नीचे जाने के बाद there comes a period where Nifty does very well. So we will partake in that, and so then eventually our returns should be higher than FD. So do not worry at all. Frankly speaking, I'm not worried at all about this fund. तो इसलिए मुझे नहीं लगता है कि आपको कुछ भी चिंता लेने की बात
नहीं, चिंता तो एसबीआई के नाम से तो लगती नहीं है सर।
तो संजीव जी विश्वास रखिए दिनेश पे।
विश्वास पूरा है सर। क्या होता है, इन्वेस्टर के क्वेश्चन पूछने होते हैं।
जी नहीं जरूर सर, बिल्कुल हमें सवाल करते रहिए। आप प्लीज आप पॉइंटेड क्वेश्चन करते रहिए, उससे हम ही बेटर होंगे सर।
सर हम भी बेटर होंगे कि आपने अपनी फर्स्ट प्रेफरेंस बताई, तो उस पर विचार करेंगे सर आगे। कॉन्ट्रा और लार्ज एंड मिड कैप।
जी थैंक यू फॉर दैट। कैन वी अनम्यूट मिस्टर आरसी चौधरी?
हेलो
जी चौधरी जी बताइए।
नमस्ते सर।
हाँ जी नमस्कार सर, बताइए।
सर मैं डिफेंस से हूँ।
जी सर।
तो मेरे क्या है कि स्टाफ वगैरह।
चौधरी साहब आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है, बीच बीच में कट रही है।
SIP वगैरह करवाते रहते हैं, तो एक तो मैं स्मॉल कैप पे उनको, सर यहाँ नेटवर्क इश्यू है, तो क्या है कि एक तो मैं एसबीआई स्मॉल कैप पे मैं करवा रहा हूँ, ऑफर कर रहा हूँ उनको। आ रहा, आवाज आ रहा है सर? हेलो,
आपका आवाज बीच बीच में कट रहा है, पर प्लीज आप बताइए आप सवाल पूछिए।
हेलो,
अभी बेटर है।
हेलो
जी चौधरी साहब पूछिए।
हेलो, एसबीआई स्मॉल में वो ऑफर कर रहा हूँ इन्वेस्ट और एक एसबीआई मल्टी कैप, एसबीआई स्मॉल कैप और एसबीआई मल्टी कैप में ऑफर कर रहा हूँ जो इन्वेस्टर को। क्या ये बेस्ट है या फिर इसके अलावा और भी कोई जैसे लॉन्ग पीरियड के लिए 10 इयर्स या 15 इयर्स के लिए?
संदीप, डू यू वांट टू टेक इट और शुड आई आंसर?
सर यू प्लीज आंसर।
हेलो,
नहीं, आप ये पूछ रहे हो ना कि आप एसबीआई स्मॉल कैप फंड और एसबीआई मल्टी कैप फंड आपके इन्वेस्टर्स को ऑफर कर रहे हो, एंड ये बढ़िया चॉइसेस है कि नहीं करके।
हाँ यस यस, इसके अलावा भी और
फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग, अगर कोई भी म्यूचुअल फंड मैनेजर को उनके वेरियस स्कीम्स के बारे में डिफरेंशिएट करने के लिए आप कहोगे, इट इज वेरी वेरी टफ. It's like asking a parent to choose among their children, right? कि like which one is better? ये आपके like elder one is better or younger one is better and so on. It's how do you answer that, right? What I'll say is this: हमारे डिफरेंट फंड्स हैं, वो हर एक फंड के अलग अलग मैंडेट है, विच इज वाई वी हैव दिस फंड्स. अगर वो मैंडेट एक ही जैसा होता तो एक ही फंड ऑफर करते. देयर वाज नो नीड टू ऑफर सो मेनी फंड्स, राइट? सो ईच ऑफ आवर फंड हैज अ वेरी डिफाइंड मैंडेट इन टर्म्स ऑफ व्हाट इट मीन्स. अभी आप स्मॉल कैप फंड की बात कर रहे हो. स्मॉल कैप फंड, व्हाट इज द मैंडेट? टू इन्वेस्ट इन द बेस्ट पॉसिबल स्मॉल कैप कंपनीज. What does that mean?
Yes.
It means that the scope for higher return is definitely much higher because small cap as a sector is less researched. So if we think we are good from a research perspective, then we should be able to spot more opportunities in the small cap space. And so the return generated should be higher. But obviously, what is the drawback or caveat? It comes with higher risk because small cap stocks, these companies are not yet fully evolved, which means the chances of an accident is higher. And two, liquidity also becomes an issue with respect to market prices. But agar aap puchoge ki small cap fund, do we feel good about it? The answer absolutely is yes. As I said, I have huge respect for R. Srinivasan, and he manages a small cap fund. Within that mandate, I'm pretty sure he is going to do his best. So I will have no hesitation whatsoever in recommending a small cap fund. But again, वो मैंडेट आप देख लीजिए. A small cap fund is meant for higher return, higher risk investors. What should not happen is someone gets into a small cap fund and उसके next 1 साल 1.5 साल में अगर कोई पूछ रहे हैं कि यार ये तो फंड रिटर्न नहीं दिया है, वो प्रॉब्लम है. Because small cap fund, again the horizon has to be long. आपने 10 साल 15 साल का, अगर वो सच में अगर horizon है तो फिर कुछ भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. These are good funds to recommend.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So I think
Thank you,
we will take another 2-3 questions. So I know Dinesh, we've taken a lot of your time, but just bear with us.
Sure.
So we can SBI MF Ranchi. Can you unmute them, because I think there are a lot of IFAs who are sitting in our branch over there. Yes, Laganji, we have unmuted. Can we unmute SBI MF Ranchi? Yes, Ranchi. Lagan, we have unmuted you, but we can't hear anything. Lagan, we can't hear anything, so we are moving on. Can we unmute Devendra Kumar Bajpai?
हेलो।
Yes, Devendra ji.
यस सर, गुड इवनिंग।
Good evening,
सर
sir.
एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है, मैंने पूरा वेबिनार तो पूरा देख लिया। इस पे टैक्सेशन कौन सा, हम लोग टैक्सेशन की बात कर रहे हैं मल्टी एसेट के लिए, तो इन्वेस्टर को इक्विटी टैक्सेशन है या कौन सा टैक्सेशन है सर इस पे?
सर ये जो फंड है इसके ऊपर डेट टैक्सेशन है, तो हम इस
सर डेट में तो, सर एक मिनट, डेट में तो फिर इंडेक्सेशन बेनिफिट अब विड्रॉ हो चुका है, तो
नहीं
इसकी।
नहीं नहीं नहीं, सुनिए ना, एक सवाल हमने बीच में पूछा था दिनेश से, तो
हाँ जी।
हमारा इंटेंट रहेगा कि हम इसमें इक्विटी जो है वो 35% रखेंगे।
ओके।
हिस्टोरिकली भी इससे कम इक्विटी हमने कभी नहीं की है। वो जरूरी नहीं है कि वो सारे स्टॉक्स ही होंगे, लॉन्ग ओनली इक्विटी ही होगी। जब भी समझिए कि अगर दिनेश का व्यू इक्विटी पे उतना पॉजिटिव नहीं है और वो 35% से कम करना चाहता है लॉन्ग इक्विटी, तो
जी।
बाकी 35% पे वो दोबारा ले आएगा उससे आर्बिट्राज खरीद के। ओके,
ठीक है,
तो
ठीक है।
इसमें इंडेक्सेशन डेट का मिलेगा बेनिफिट आपको, पर टैक्सेशन इसमें डेट टैक्सेशन ही होगा। इक्विटी के लिए हम नहीं, बिकॉज वी वांट टू मेक दिस फंड ट्रूली मल्टी एसेट फंड।
हाँ
हम
जी।
सिर्फ इक्विटी टैक्सेशन देने के चक्कर में अगर हम अपना व्यू फंड के अंदर नहीं प्ले कर पाए, तो वो दैट वी फील इज नॉट राइट।
तो सर इन्वेस्टर को क्या ट्रीट करेगा? मान लीजिए वो 5 साल के बाद विड्रॉ करता है, तो उसको एज ऑफ नाउ इंडेक्सेशन बेनिफिट मिलेगा उसको, यू मीन टू से?
हाँ, yeah. So unlike पहले there were only two regimes, right? Either आप equity taxation, a fund was qualifying for equity taxation or debt taxation. Now there is essentially three scenarios. You have equity taxation, you have fixed income taxation with no indexation, and then you have this in between thing where it is fixed income but with indexation. This will
Okay.
fall into the in between category, which means that this will not be equity taxation, as Sandeep said, and that is a very conscious decision that you have taken, because वो equity taxation के चक्कर में आप पूरा benefit fixed income का ले ही नहीं पाओगे at times, आप पूरा benefit gold का ले ही नहीं पाओगे at times, फिर क्या मतलब हुआ multi asset का? A multi-asset fund should truly be multi-asset, which means that there should be times where you have much more than 35% in duration, much more than 35% if necessary in gold. So we want to do that, but we also want to provide the indexation benefit. So this fund, it will essentially be fixed income, but with indexation benefit, which is the third category that has essentially come into being this year.
So sir, this clause or this thing is mentioned somewhere in the documentation?
संदीप,
सो सी देवेंद्र जी, वही मैं आपको बता रहा हूं कि हम ये हमारे एसआईडी में तो नहीं है। ओके, पर इस फंड को आज तक हमने ऐसा ही चलाया और आगे तो हम बिल्कुल इंश्योर करेंगे कि हम 35 करें। तो वी विल डू दैट एक्सरसाइज, बिकॉज वो पूरी एक्सरसाइज जो मेरे को फंड की फंडामेंटल एट्रीब्यूट जो चेंज करने की एक्सरसाइज है, वो एक अलग ही एक्सरसाइज है, उसके अंदर वो हम करेंगे। बट आज हम आपको ये बता रहे हैं कि इस फंड को हम मैनेज जिस तरह से करेंगे, इसमें 35% इक्विटी हमेशा होगा।
नहीं, वो आपकी बात सर, आई अंडरस्टैंड, आपने जो कह रहे हैं बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं, बट प्रॉब्लम ये होगा कि क्योंकि आपको गवर्नमेंट का स्टैंड चेंज हो गया है, तो जब भी 3 साल 4 साल के बाद जब इन्वेस्टर हमारा उसको रिडीम करेगा या 5 साल के बाद रिडीम करेगा, तो उसको सीए को क्या दिखाना है, बट वो कहाँ से, उसको तो मालूम नहीं ना, कहीं अगर डॉक्यूमेंटेशन में होगा तो देन ही कैन फाइल फॉर दिस इंडेक्सेशन बेनिफिट।
नहीं तो ऐसा है, हमने क्या, हम असेट एलोकेशन अपनी वेबसाइट के ऊपर इसका दिखाने की आप हमारा थॉट प्रोसेस है, तो वो हम स्टार्ट करेंगे। तो जब भी आप निकलोगे, जिस टाइम पे भी आपका इन्वेस्टर निकलेगा, जो पिछले 12 महीने में इसकी एसेट एलोकेशन रही होगी, उस बेसिस के ऊपर आप रिटर्न्स फाइल कर सकते हैं सर।
ठीक है सर, ठीक है,
थैंक यू। Can we unmute SBIMF Ranchi once again, because I think there are a lot of questions from the IFAs who are sitting there. Just try once again. या लगन, हमने फिर से अनम्यूट किया है, प्लीज। लगन, आवाज नहीं आ रही है। Okay, can we unmute Akshay? Akshay Deep is also our employee over there. Akshay, yeah, go ahead, Akshay.
Good evening, sir. We have Mr. Abhishek with us.
Ji.
Sir, he is going to ask the question. Just a minute.
गुड इवनिंग सर. सर माय क्वेश्चन इज, अभी जो आप फंड बता रहे हैं एसबीआई का मल्टी एसेट्स लोकेशन फंड, तो इसमें इक्विटी, डेब्ट और गोल्ड तीनों का पोर्शन है. तो सर अभी तो बाजार परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा है, इसीलिए आप इसमें इक्विटी वगैरह गोल्ड और डेब्ट में आप लगाने के लिए बोल रहे हैं. लेकिन इन केस अगर बाजार यहाँ से परफॉर्म करता है तब तो ये फंड वैसा रिटर्न नहीं दे पाएगा ना, कहेगी इसमें इक्विटी का पोर्शन तो ज्यादा है नहीं.
राइट.
तो उस केस में क्या करना चाहिए सर?
नहीं, ये तो like I think it's very important to clarify that this fund should not be confused with a 100% equity fund. ये when आप एकदम सही कह रहे हो कि when equity does very well, will this fund be able to compete with a pure equity fund? The answer is no. So this fund inherently is meant for people who are looking for lower risk, lower return. And in my opinion, a significant majority of investors are probably going to fall into that. Because अगर किसी को भी आप कहोगे कि आपका जो भी सेविंग्स है 100% आप इक्विटी में डाल दो, almost everyone will worry about that. यार उसमें तो फिर रिस्क बहुत बढ़ जाता है, फिर then maybe I should just do part of that in equity. And the remaining part they keep in FD or debt or whatever, right? Here we are saying that we will do the asset allocation job for you, which means that आपका जो भी है, whatever you are inherently saving, put it where we will do the job of asset allocation for you. Will it be 100% equity? No, the answer is no. So if markets do very well, agar markets, if Nifty does extremely well, will this fund underperform Nifty index and most of the equity funds? Yes. But inherently over any longer time frame, will this fund be much lower risk than a pure equity fund? The answer again is yes. So the way you have to think about it is asset allocation, who wants to do? If an investor wants to do the asset allocation at his or her end, or an intermediary wants to do asset allocation at his or her end, fine. The other option is the pool you put in this fund and let the fund do the asset allocation for you. That is the essential thought process.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sandeep, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. There is a question in the chat box. You have a position in Alphabet and Microsoft as a fund house, but why not Apple stock? When we see Warren Buffett, he has huge holding in Apple.
Yeah. So for us, it's first of all, it's a function of prioritization in the sense that, when it comes to Indian stocks, we have a very big experienced team where we can sort of score for the largest company or the smallest possible company. We can look across the entire landscape. And so with respect to Indian markets, we can cover it all. But when it comes to a market like US, where we are ramping up, there is a bandwidth issue where we have to prioritize, because we don't have the bandwidth at this point to go for every single company out there. So then we did a prioritization, and there the thought process for us was हम बाहर क्यों जाएं? Why should we go to an external market? At least for me, the number one reason is to go for a type of company that we don't have available in the Indian landscape. What I mean by that is India has very good consumer companies. I mean, you look at some of our consumer companies, they are the best in the world from a return perspective, quality, and so on, right? So even if there is a good consumer company in US, I will put that lower in the priority because my thought process will be that, यार मेरे पास तो India में ही वो अच्छे consumer companies हैं. Why do I need to necessarily go to US for such companies, right? So from a prioritization perspective, the thought process was, let's first go for companies where that kind of model is not available in India. And that is where names like Alphabet, Nvidia, and even Microsoft. It sort of fit this profile much better. Apple to me is a fantastic company, but Apple is called a tech. It's really a consumer company, right? And it's a good company, but from a prioritization perspective, in terms of companies where the profile is just not available in the Indian market, it will be a name like Nvidia. India में तो कोई ऐसा chip company है ही नहीं. When I think about a company like Alphabet, ऐसे type का company है ही नहीं India में. So that it was more a question of prioritization. Eventually, as we fully ramp up, I'm sure names like Apple will also potentially come in the basket. But from an initial stage perspective, we felt that companies that look very different from the normal Indian company is where we want to focus our attention on first.
Okay, then we can take last two questions. So from a 5-year, again, these are kind of, people get confused which fund to suggest. So one question is there from a 5-year perspective, which ones should you suggest, BAF or multi-asset? Taking into consideration, these are very difficult questions to reply. Please understand that BAF and multi-asset, agar mere se aap pucho, they are very different strategies. Adding gold, further refines the asset allocation exposure that you are taking in multi-asset. I think ये 2-3 बारी दिनेश ने पहले भी बताया. So
the simple answer is this: is gold a good diversification enhancer? Does adding gold add value to an asset allocation type portfolio? The answer is yes. So from that perspective, you got the answer. All else being equal. No, the problem is it's never all else being equal. But all else being equal, adding gold as part of the asset allocation mix definitely yields benefits.
Okay, I think we have a many questions which are still unanswered, but because of paucity of time, we'll have to stop here. My only request to you is I am writing down, our email ID in the chat box. So please, would request you to go, write your queries over there. You can write down the email also, advisorsupport@sbimf.com. Advisorsupport at sbimf.com. So please, write down to us. We'll try to respond to each of your queries. I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. I would like to thank Dinesh for giving his time and clarifying, telling us about markets, about global markets, as well as about multi-asset fund. We are getting huge support from all of you. DP sir mentioned that at the beginning of the call, that almost 50% of the net flows of the industry we have got at SBI Mutual Fund. Equity, how many asset management companies today can give you names of so many funds which have been doing well. We have SBI Contra, SBI Large and Mid Cap, SBI Mid Cap. We have our Children Benefit Fund. We have SBI Small Cap. So, there are so many funds, which have been doing well for over a long period of time. So my request to you, and now we have SBI Balance Advantage Fund, and we are focusing very much on SBI Multi-Asset Fund. So my request to you is please continue with your support. We will never let you down. And continue to join us on these calls. What we intend to do through these calls is to share our thoughts and views with all of you. So with that, I would like to close this call now. Thank you very much, all of you, once again for joining in. Thank you very much.